Greetings, colleagues across town and across the globe. Here at the home base in Texas, it's Thursday, February 25 in the year of our Lord 2021. How does that sound to you people listening to this on whatever media you use in the distant future? Well, I'll tell you what, it's been an interesting period of time back here in the 21st century. Tonight, as usual, we're going to be talking about things that are current and things that have recently happened around here and around the world. I'm going to be joined by some of my crack investigators as we talk about, first of all, the winter storm in Texas, and then the dawn of the new Biden presidency, and then the second impeachment of Donald Trump, and then the economy, stupid, and then the stimulus bill. If we get to all of those things, and you know by now, we rarely get to everything we want to tell you about, but we're going to try to. And who is it that's going to help me try to dig through this mountain of data? Well, three of the best investigators who have ever worked for me. One that you may recognize, and if you do, then you better explain to me why, is my friend Dan Singbear. Dan Singbear is a legend in his own time. He is a warehouse supervisor at the Advanced Swimwear Research Facility in Modesto, California. Now, before that, he was a lead writer for the Help Yourself to a Handout radio program that is syndicated all over the earth, and you've probably listened to it. And before that, he was, and I think he still is, an ultra modern dance instructor at the Zen Masters annual picnic in Sarasota, Florida. And like all of my craft investigators, he's got a popular book on the New York Times bestseller list. It's called Larded Bean Recipes Your Hairdresser Doesn't Want Me to Know About, Volume 2. Dan, I have been thinking about this lately because I've tried some of your larded bean recipes that I'm not supposed to know about. And I wonder why Volume 2? Was Volume 1 a big success around town?
Yes, you might say that the sales were quite bloated. I felt very proud of the success that brought them sweeping off the shelves, usually in a rather explosive manner. So we were very progressive in our ability to just blow out these retail places that you just don't see anymore. You don't see the success, you don't see the brick and mortar. You really don't see much after a blowout like these.
No, in fact, I can see where you're coming from, but I can't really feel it. Another investigator that you may have read about, I don't think you've seen her in person though, May be not. And May has been around, like I say, all of my investigators have done it all. She is the founder of the Children's Crusade for Puberty, um, an honorary chair of the Southern Ornithology Refrigeration Advisory Group, and she has been a mandolin player in the French Swiss band Wanda's Headache. She also has a bestseller. It's called Designing the Patio of Your Dreams as Extremists Question Your Integrity. Um, May, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. Other people have told me that you don't actually have a patio yourself,
No,
right?
I don't. Oh, also hi. I don't have a patio. But they questioned me anyway, so I figure I have authority to offer advice.
I bet you do. Um, my third crack investigator, and of course I have more, but these are the ones that come with me to the show. Razor Blade is famous in his own mind and in my mind. He um, he is the organizer of the 250-man March for Home Delivery. He's a consultant to the United Nations Committee on Renaming Farm Machinery, which that's certainly that's in the news all the time these days. And he also was an advocate for accountability in the construction industry humor area, sphere. I don't know, call it what you like. He also has authored a New York Times bestseller, and it's called Supervising the Small Talk of Delinquents and Technicians in an Era of Shame and Retribution. Um, Ray, I know there's a lot of shame and retribution going on, but you're not really guilty of anything, right?
Well, probably technically I'm not guilty of anything. I mean that whole restraining order business was just a misunderstanding. But as a former lapsed Catholic, I do carry a great deal of guilt, but I am dealing with it. And
Yeah,
I find that the writing of the book really helps. So
right. As a former lapsed Catholic myself, these gatherings we have let me let go of a lot of stuff I'm carrying. I don't want to call it a burden, but it is something I'm carrying around. Anyway, we got to dig right in. This is one time where the weather was actually the news. And I'm talking about that giant climate catastrophe that took took over most of the consciousness in Texas. It was a disaster. But like always, there and before I even talk about that, you know, May, it looks to me like you haven't completely recovered, so to speak, from the weather here in Texas.
Who? Oh, that's me. Yeah, it's been 9 days now without power or water or sleep. And I'm sort of feeling like, despite all the sawing and banging, like maybe they just forgot. But luckily, I have a good battery on this computer, and my neighbor's password, his Wi-Fi password, turned out to be password, so that worked out. And I have this really refreshing pool water that's
You
yeah,
you don't actually swim in that, do you?
not anymore, no.
Okay, all right. Well, like I was saying, there were some upsides for a few people while this crisis was going on, and what I mean is this: I have a friend. I'm not going to name him. I mean, he'd be embarrassed, but one of
I
my
would. I really
friends,
would. I'm
yeah,
sorry. Go on.
one of my friends installed a nuclear reactor on his roof. And so he has his own power. He never lost his power, although he tells me that most of the things he was going to eat seem to be radiated in some way. I also have heard around the virtual water cooler that a lot of men enjoyed, well, not exactly enjoyed, were okay with this crisis because they didn't have to shave. Now, and for days, I mean, they didn't have to shave. Now,
Well,
there were
hold on.
down.
Hold on. I want to add that I think that before you get into the hairiness of the problem, I find there is an increase in Eskimo kisses. Sales of my all natural, locally farmed, cage free, vegan tauntaun pelts, that are his and hers, they shot up. It came with the free laser sword keychain.
it's
I did
actually
really well.
worked well for me too, boss, because there's been a giant increase in spooning, and I actually own the license rights to spooning. So every time someone spoons, I get a small piece of coinage, a little bit of Bitcoin. So it's, if you know your investment opportunities, like Dan does, there's some upside.
Well, there's also some downsides because, for one thing, I know a survivalist lady. Um, she's pretty rational. I mean, for a survivalist lady, but she has an entire converted oh, what did you used to call them, bomb shelters or whatever. In her basement, she has lots of food that you just add water and it's ready to go. Unfortunately, she didn't have any water, but you know how that is. This whole problem in Texas came about because ERCOT, who is supposed to manage the electrical system here in Texas, they sort of dropped the ball. So we want to talk about ERCOT for a minute. And I want to tell you the thing you've probably already heard that's true is that ERCOT's board of directors includes people who don't live in Texas. And our governor, you probably are very fond of him for his straightforward ability to deal with crisis. He's learned from ERCOT that there is a lot of common sense attached to moving to Wyoming and governing Texas from there. So keep an eye out for changes like that. But let me ask you, let me tell you something about ERCOT. Most people think that that's the Energy Reliability Council of Texas. That's the cover story. Look at this slide we've got here. And this one is something that Dan brought to me a while back. I didn't understand it at the time. If you look at the letterhead, 11 rich capitalists on tranquilizers. That's who was running our energy grid. And it's frustrating to hear about that. But let's just be honest here. While some people are trying to get along, every time there's a crisis like this, somebody's trying to make a buck. I've got a slide here about something that's on sale on the internet. It appears to be an at-home desalination station. Cost you a couple of grand to get one, but I suppose that's a discounted price. I don't know. The last time I was at a Home Depot or lowest down than the lows, I thought I saw the same thing for about 1995, and there's no guarantee these things work. There's another dimension to this. People are going to be asked to pay a fortune for the electricity that they so-called used, but did they even use it during these last couple of weeks? And we have a slide here. There are some estimates that people will be paying up to 1,700, couple of grand for their electricity bill. But the upside of this, if you want to call it such, is that you will now own part of this 11 rich capitalists on tranquilizers. You'll own that. I guess it's going to be a penny stock at the beginning, but May, you told me that you don't really have to worry about that because you paid for your electricity with Bitcoin.
Well, it did seem like a really good idea at first, but my electric bill went from $30 to $17,000 an hour ago. It was at 90, and I think now it's up to 1,200. So I guess we'll see.
Well,
Boss, I've found a solution to the problem here is I just hack into my neighbor's meter. It's actually quite easy to do. So I pay
good.
nothing for my electricity.
I
well,
should have
that's
tried that.
fabulous. But even if we can get around the expense, a lot of us, I've seen some cars already. We've got a slide. License plates in Texas have changed from the Lone Star State to the Lone Stark State because we're all by ourselves on that Texas energy grid. And, when I first heard about this, I thought they were talking about gridirons. And for a football place like Texas, I thought it was funny that we would be getting off somebody else's gridiron. But, you can see how I'm confused by these things.
Boss, actually, it was Iron Man's forebears who warned us that winter is coming. So, previous president even built a half-mile wall, but Elsa's caravan of Sven got through anyway.
So you say there were 4 bears. I always thought it was 3, but I'm thinking
it was
about
arm in
a
arm.
different story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
we got one more slide I want you to see that has to do with this crisis and the fact that a lot of people's pipes burst. What are they going to do about that? Where are they going to get pipe to repair things? Well, it turns out that the Biden administration, if you have been paying attention, they're going to cancel not only the Keystone pipeline, but the Roger Stone pipeline. And I think that's going to make a whole lot of pipe available for people who need to repair things. But I got to tell you, that pipe is probably a little bigger than what you're used to using under the house. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
And pipe layers are going to be in demand, and I'm actually really good at laying pipe, so I'm kind of looking forward to this as an opportunity.
well, let me go to another dimension of this while we're talking about opportunities. Senator Cruz of Texas had made a mistake, you could say, by taking the opportunity of a crisis to get out of town, so to speak. I think we've got a slide here. You've probably heard the stories and the excuses from Senator Cruz. When he left town and people found out about it, um, he first said that he was just trying to do the right thing, set a good example. And honestly, if you've got more money than you can spend and you don't have a real job, it does make sense to kind of pack up and get out of town. But that excuse didn't serve him well, so there was a second one, and we've got a slide here. This is something that Ray found for me. He actually had some bonus points on the Southwest airline, and he had to use them up on a trip to, I guess it was either Mexico or Ecuador. He had to use them right away. They were expiring. So that was his next excuse. But he didn't stop there.
Now hold on a second. It just struck me, because every time I keep hearing about Heidi Cruz, I always thought it was either he's being filmed in 4K, or Heidi Cruz was now an inaction figure, like a combination tequila bottle topper or a toilet brush cozy.
Well, what I heard was some of the aides to Senator Cruz kept hearing him say, "Hide me, hide me, hide me." And behind his back, they were saying, "Hide me, Cruz, hide me, Cruz." And so I think that the story may have been garbled in the press. But you could be right there, Dan. You usually
I'm
are
usually
on,
right there. I am
I was going to say on top of a story, whereas Ray is usually underneath a story and he has a
looking
different
up.
perspective. But I want to tell you, there is a possibility that Ted was not kidding us, because we went to the airport to track down his latest statement. He said he was actually planning to come back to Houston. When he got to the airport, he found out, because he went to the wrong gate. He thought he was going to Houston, and instead he was going to Cancun. And there was another gate right next to that. They were going to Oslo, and I think he jumped on that excuse.
He actually thought he saw the word Gates, and he thought he was actually going to a Bill Gates vaccination seminar. So
I thought it was a climate seminar in Oslo, but I guess they're the same thing, huh?
yeah, the Oslo there was in fact a climate change seminar in Oslo, but he doesn't really understand that other countries exist, so he was a little bit confused by that.
All right. Well, look, before we leave this subject, and we're about to leave this subject, I'll tell you the truth. It wasn't just Ted Cruz that was leaving town. Our Attorney General, Mr. Paxton, God bless him, or something, I don't know if that's the right expression. He headed for Utah to talk to the governor of Utah. And we've got a slide here. Here's why he says he went. He has a Google antitrust suit, and so does the governor of Utah. So he had to go talk to him and find out how it works. I mean, you can see in the picture, we've got the slide there. You can see that it's brightly covered, but what you can't see is that it's got a long extension cord and it needs to be plugged in somewhere. So anyway, I guess he's enjoying his time in Utah. It's a little warmer there. Enough about our winter crisis. Let's talk about the new political landscape. And I'll try to go fast here. I know I don't want to bore you with stuff you think you already know. But when Biden came into office, obviously the first thing he wanted to do is use a bunch of executive orders to undo everything Donald Trump did. First one may surprise you. He moved the capital back to D.C. So
In Tel
where
Aviv.
was it? It was in Florida. One of the last things Trump did was to move the capital away from D.C. And look at this next slide. The reason he did that, he started taking apart what was being constructed along the famous or now infamous border wall, and using the spare parts, including pipe, I might add, to build a wall around Mar-a-Lago. We've got a picture there from the National Security Administration. Biden decided on hearing about these moves, he decided he's got to restore English as the official language of the country. Now, I'm not sure what it was under the former president, but I know that basically the vocabulary was limited to about 100 words, and
Right.
that includes all 50 adverbs and adjectives, and I guess the rest were mostly verbs like pound and
And
you,
yeah,
you,
and multi-syllabic words were prohibited before. So now
that's right.
we're breaking in slowly. We're going to go with 2-syllable words now, and then gradually over the next 4 years move up to where we could have 4 or 5 syllables in our words.
There you go. That's what I was going to say.
You know,
of course,
gentlemen,
you told me that.
I hear that Big Razor has been on Capitol Hill lately, lobbying with a renegade sect of diplomacy minded evangelicals for a policy of the chic ton of goodwill for unwed mothers of unshorn babies.
Let me tell you something about these fundamentalist sects, because let me give you the background. Trump also pulled us out of the Outer Space Treaty, and that's something Biden forgot about. He hasn't undone that. Why were we in the Outer Space Treaty? Well, basically, that goes way back to the 1960s, and the countries of the earth said, nobody owns the moon. You can put a flag down there, but you don't own it, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you've also noticed that Trump is planning to leave not only town to Florida, but leave Earth to get away from some of the lawsuits that are, right there breathing down his neck right now. And after he goes to the moon, where he thinks he's going to set up a new capital and broadcast under new regulations that have nothing to do with anything here in the States, notice where we are now, going to Mars, because that red planet has something that well, I don't know, it's something red. But anyway,
is it possible, boss, that he's considering moving to Europa because he thinks Greenland is part of Europa and he might be able to purchase it? And
he doesn't have enough fuel yet for Jupiter. But think about this. They want to go to Mars for the Mars mission. And remember what Dan just told you, this has to do with those fundamentalist religious sects that know they're not going to be welcome here for much longer, so they're going to the moon. Anyway,
Yes, you always get better sects in outer space.
Yes, and we'll come back to that question of better sex later. I mean, being weightless has advantages, but being in traction, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Beyond undoing these executive orders of the former president, you also have cabinet members. And some of the cabinet members proposed by the new president are coming under fire. I guess that's the way to say it. Some of them, there's a couple of cabinet officers that speak more than one language, and that is definitely suspicious to, or let's say, right-wing conservatives who think those people must be spies. But you also have people like Neera Tanden, who is being pushed around because she made a bunch of confrontational partisan tweets, something that was definitely a no-no under the prior administration. And Deb Haaland, um, she's being attacked because what kind of logic is it to have an indigenous American um, protecting the indigenous? Well, anyway, anyway, some of them are under attack, but the main attack.
Well, wait. Before you move on, it's my understanding that the president not only has cabinet appointments, he's got tabletop exercises, caucus-wide touching of bases, and he plans to raise the bar. You know, the one across from the metro entrance at 14th and U, to make way for more pizza shop tunnels.
Well, you learn something every night. But I'll tell you this, that goes to the criticism that a lot of people are making of Biden's cabinet, which is to say it doesn't look like America. And I think we've got a slide. It's pretty obvious that his cabinet, well, it doesn't look like America. It looks like a cabinet, pretty much.
And several of the members, boss, are under attack because apparently some of his cabinet members can read without moving their mouths, which makes them very suspicious in the eyes of several of our former president supporters.
Yeah, well, I think the Defense Department is going to go into the area of sub-vocalization, and we're going to have submarines that I guess they talk to whales and dolphins and things.
Yeah, they're gonna elevate a humpback whale to a cabinet level position, is what I've been told.
Okay. Well, I don't see why not, because we're going to talk about the old presidential seal in a minute. But before we get there, Biden has a gift of gab, but sometimes he kind of gets tongue-tied. So you probably saw the story lately where Biden told America's allies, he said, America is in back, as opposed to America is in front. But
and as someone who likes to see the stories from the bottom, that I think being in back is actually quite a good position. I wouldn't mind having America in my back. So
yeah,
maybe it's like when the little kids with the last names at the end of the alphabet, so they don't feel bad. Sometimes they go in reverse alphabetical order. Maybe that's what he meant.
We don't really know what he meant, do we? But one thing we do know is that he has now said that the former president will not get intelligent briefings. And
yeah.
I can think of some reasons why that would be true, but he is going to let him use the cafeteria, the CIA's cafeteria, for pizza nights, because that was one of his favorite things. But
you know,
anyway.
In a recent national poll by Acme Prevaricators, appears to be support for intelligent debriefings. That's where AI determines a threat to national security, and an IBM robot powered by Watson shows up on a golf course and rips the underpants from prospective offenders.
Well, that puts the whole thing in perspective.
That's really going to drive a wedge in these inter-party negotiations.
Yeah, well, speaking of driving a wedge, the next thing we want to talk about is the Republican Civil War, because right now there is a fight for the soul of that party, just like there was a fight for the soul of the country. And it has to do, like we've got in the slide here, and I think this story was in the Lake Huron Howler. That's interesting. I've never been to that newspaper. I try to visit them all. Anyway, they say in their headline, censor or censure. And what they mean is that some of the people want the Republican Party to still be Trump's party, and some of them would like to shake off everything in the Trumpster dumpster. You know what I'm saying? So there are two wings in the Republican Party right now. And so it's about a future. Let me just give you an example of how fluid this situation is. You know, Senator Lindsey Graham, we have looked at his website lately, and he changes his mind on things so many times. Like he said, I'm out of here to Trump, and then he said, I'm back here. I want to play some golf. he has a website where you can tell what his position is today. And I think they update it once a day. Like there's a morning and an evening because he's not really that consistent. Some of these things are obvious position points for the emerging Republican majority and so forth. But look at this. He does not know if he supports a Green New Deal, but he is thinking about that green nude eel. And I think here in Texas, when we had the big winter storm and we had the so-called fake snow, a lot of things started coming out of that ice and snow, including, at least at my house, some green. Anyway,
I had a lot of yellow snow at my house, boss, but there's
Sorry,
rumor
I
that
was trying to get your attention. Yeah, sorry, my fault.
oh, is that
I
your
try
bad?
to stay out of. I try to stay out of his yard, but yeah, he noticed.
Yeah, well, okay. The other thing on Senator Graham's site that caught my attention, he is in favor of an Antifa manhunt, but he doesn't know about an Antifa woman hunt. That's a lot of the party is there. So anyway, among the people who want to get free from Donald Trump would be Liz Cheney, who, voted for his impeachment. Now, why do the Republicans on the other side of the coin there let her stay around? Look at this picture of her attic. She has some files. This reminds me of how J. Edgar Hoover used to control things. Files on everybody in Congress. So she's got her position solidified, but the main lightning rod or spark plug or whatever you want to call it on the other side of the equation would be that new Congresswoman, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Let's go back to the Lake Huron howler here. They're reporting a mass exodus of Republicans who want to office in the greenhouse. I think they're building the greenhouse, right down the road from the fortifications around the cap. They can't build it inside, so they'll have to be outside of the chain link fence and the barbed wire and whatever. But a lot of Republicans are going there. And the ones following Marjorie Taylor Greene, well, look at this recent post here that is talking, and this is in the Boy Georgia Gazette, which I read all the time. It's saying that McCarthy asks Congresswoman Greene to sit on the sex education and labor pains committees. Now, a lot of people thought that meant an assignment, but if you look at the story, they had to print a story later that day retracting it because he said, no, he gave her a plum assignment, not a committee seat. So first thing comes to my mind, sitting on some of these committees.
That's actually I've been told, boss, that's actually a reference to one of her sexual proclivities.
Oh, that explains a lot. And I guess they don't have seating assignments before they engage in these athletic.
No, I think basically they lock themselves in a death cage, steel death cage match, and whoever prevails gets the best seat.
Okay, so she didn't actually get a seat on the committee, but she got a plum assignment. Now I've been looking into this. Oh, and so has Dan. He told me about this. There's a story in the St. Louis Spatula and Dispatula. That's a newspaper I didn't even know about until Texas froze down. But it talks about the trip that McCarthy made down to Mar-a-Lago to talk to the president, not president-elect, the past
former
president.
Occupant.
Former occupant, yes. And he was relaying some news about the plum mystery. Now, what I have been able to put together with the with the assistance of these investigators and a couple of more who are afraid to come on the air. I mean, and rightly so. This has something to do with the presidential seal. Do you see this slide, this picture of the dollar bill with the presidential seal on it? Back when they were talking about having our currency include people like Ms. Tubman and so forth, President Trump was saying, no, I want the presidential seal on our new dollar bills. And the presidential seal apparently liked plums or ate plums, or, well, I'm not sure if plum is an actual fruit in this case or an acronym for something, okay? But soon it developed that Mr. E, that presidential seal, and the plum, whatever that is, were missing. So we
Uh-oh.
got together, we knocked heads, all of us, and you can see that Ray still has kind of a sore from when we knocked heads. And anyway, we knocked heads and we got our hands on a manual. Now, let's go back to Marjorie Taylor Greene for a minute. She is the lady who used to talk about Jewish space lasers, right? Right? And that's why people think she's kind of kooky. Well, we've got a manual. The manual is for something called the spasmatic, and the spasmatic apparently was developed in conjunction with the Soros Global Control Weapons Group. Huh.
True.
Pretty interesting. But look at this. Look at this. In the back of it, there are some warnings about using this spasmatic device. And it says here that according to some tests that were done by the Pacific Gas and Electric Company, that you could cause wildfires if you keep this thing on the roast setting too long.
But
So if you ask
there is
me,
an exception there, boss. That if you vacuum your forest with the Roomba like they do in Norway, then there's an exception that allows you to use the laser.
I see. So that's probably why they were able to eventually put those fires out in California.
Yeah, there was a huge swarm of Roomba vacuums were introduced into the forest, and they just swept up all the debris down on the ground, and that deprived the fuel of fire.
Well,
So.
we were going to talk about the tremendous increase in Roomba sales when we got to the economy stupid, but I guess we don't have to discuss it now because we already know why. Anyway.
Hey, boss, by the way, in case anyone's wondering, this is not a plum. This is not the missing plum. I don't know anything about the seal. This is, in fact, it's an ERCOT. No, it's a pluot. What is a pluot? Well, anyway,
It's
never
kind
mind.
of like an apricot, isn't it?
I think so. Well, I guess this one's turned then. So
Okay.
you know,
Well,
never
have you
mind.
been marinating it in your pool water, May? I hear
Mm.
pool water is a good preservative for those. Is that your experience?
Possibly. I was actually given that pluot or whatever by a raccoon in my backyard, and he gave me 3 wishes, and he told me everything's going to be okay. At least I hope that happened.
Oh, that's a stimulating. I mean, well, I mean that's a comforting story. We'll talk about
Really,
stimulating ones in a minute, but that's fascinating. And don't drink too much of that, because I think there's people who need what you have there. I mean, you could probably like the ERCOT people. You could probably sell it for 2,000-3,000 a hit.
That's my hope.
Okay. Anyway, when we talk about this Republican Civil War, you know that a whole lot of the party thinks that the party of winking at this kind of stuff. The more conservative, real conservative members of the Republican Party, they just hope all this will go away soon. The one thing that both wings of the party can agree on, they want cancel culture. And we should be clear about what that is. We've got a slide here from the Amarillo archives. they want to cancel culture just because people who are cultured, and they know some stuff or they're educated, they present a danger to retro politics. And well, that's about how it goes.
If they cancel cultures, though, won't that put a lot of stress on the pearl diving industry? They're going to have to up the unemployment for pearl divers, I think, if they cancel cultures.
Yeah, Ray, I told you we would get to the economy later, but
I'm just so eager, boss, to get there.
you've already told people a couple of secrets that they wouldn't have otherwise known.
And I don't think they'll ever get past Big Yogurt. That's a strong lobbying company.
I know they're strong. They have a strong odor anyway. I mean, when you drive past the plant,
Yeah.
you
Well,
can
that's
tell.
Big Petri dish.
Yeah, you can tell what county you're in, or what state of mind you're in. Anyway, let's run up here to the. We've got so much to cover. The presidential impeachment, the second one. First of all, Trump didn't testify. Why? He said he had laryngitis.
I've been told it was his bone spurs prevented him from walking into the committee hearing.
I heard the dog ate his subpoena, except I didn't think he had a dog.
No, I think
he went in with the
has
presidential seal. He was going to be wheeled in on a handcart, strapped in.
Oh.
It's a popular mode.
Okay.
Kind of like Hannibal Lecter.
I've attended all of the Hannibal lectures, and you learn a lot in those lectures if you don't fall asleep. If you drink enough pool water, it'll keep you awake, even through the boring parts. Even you could go to the Mars mission, and you could listen to those sermons and stay awake. But I digress. The main defense, the president's defenders, his lawyers, they said everybody in politics is looking for a fight. And that's why you shouldn't be particularly bothered that the president talked about fighting like hell. And that seems to be just a way of selling this upcoming fight between AOC, very popular on one side of the equation, and Ted Cruz. We've got the slide here that comes from the CNN enemy. They're talking about this all the time because they have the fight like hell, and it's a fight to the finish line. There's another ad that I looked at the other day, Fist, Fury, Finland. So I'm not sure why they were going to fight to the finish line, but I guess they just decided, use a neutral country.
Well, I think it was just a simple matter of there was a typo in the initial press release, and they spelled finish with two N's. So it just sort of built up in itself and cascaded into moving the whole fight to Finland.
I guess that's just one of the accidents that's going to happen if you try to improve the official language of the country and start using more syllables. You're going to, spell check, my goodness. How did we live without it? Or did we? Anyway, there was some new evidence that was introduced there at the second impeachment hearing, and this was evidence about the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. And this is a story, I've seen it in the Nashville Plutocrat, talking about a secret report that says Bill and Melinda Gates were actually cloned thousands of times, and that's who attacked not real Trump supporters. And in fact, Senator Ron Johnson keeps telling the story that there were fake Trump supporters. He defends the party line so often that they're now calling him the party linebacker. But anyway,
I think that's possible, boss, because they use Microsoft beta software for cloning, so all the clones look differently. So there could be some truth to that rumor, because as we all know, beta is Greek for still doesn't work. So,
well, and for anyone unaware at this point, Ohio's Children of Mary Religious Order are still offering their support to political rallies via their QAnon program.
Oh, so that's how that's sort of like a secret. That's like, what do they call that? Dog whistles, huh? Well, not seal whistles, I guess. And speaking of seal, um, you thought people were saying stop the seal who are up there at that well, that mob event, whatever you want to call it. We've got a picture of one of the guys, and what they were really saying is stop the seal. So it goes back to that, well, that
Oh, he
mystery.
was running away with the plum, wasn't he? I bet that's why they wanted him to stop.
Well, I think we're going to get to the bottom of it because I've got one other report here to give you in a minute. And I haven't even showed this to my crack investigators. That's how secret this is. But let's just say this about that second impeachment. That as a result of this impeachment coming up, there are a few people around the president that are tarnished, like Mr. Pillow Man, okay, Mr. Linder. But there are a lot of people around the president who seem to be doing just fine. For example, Jim Jordan, who is always defending the president. Uh,
The
he,
ex-president,
the what?
the former,
Oh,
the
yes, I keep forgetting the former president.
yeah, trauma does that to you.
Yeah, trauma. I'm still cold. that's that's why
You're cold.
I'm
You're
wearing
cold.
this bear the bear suit.
Trauma.
Anyway,
Trauma's very real. It's very, very real. Anyway, sorry to interrupt, boss.
hang in there, May. I think you're gonna make it.
Yeah.
We don't have that much long. We've only got about 15 minutes to go. Um, anyway, Jim Jordan, he is going around to flat Earth conventions, and he is telling them. We've got a slide. He's telling them that the Earth is not flat. It's actually pillow shaped. Pillow shaped. I have some opinions myself about
my take on it is the Earth actually, contrary to what people say, it's not a sphere. It's more of a rhomboid. So what you do is you take a sine wave or a cosine wave set out of sequence, and you rotate it around the z-axis, and it produces something between a rhomboid and a tetrahedron. So it's it also, if you do a surface integral of that same function, you'll also get something that tends to look a bit like a pillow.
So they did all of this research to make that your pillow.
No, this is strictly all my. I did this when I was in sixth grade.
Okay, all right. That
I
clears
was
this up.
somewhat of a prodigy back at the time, and
I remember that.
because of all the trauma of us headbutting, I've lost a lot of that intellect. But back in the day, I could go toe to toe with the best of them.
Well, another person who goes toe to toe with the best, in fact, an associate of the president who's been nominated for a Nobel Prize, Jared Kushner. And I guess he gets, according to the stories I've read in the Boston Repeater, they want to give him a Nobel Prize for erect posture. Huh. You think they would give me one? I mean, people always used to tell me that I was erect.
Well, they are going to. It's going to be shared between Ivanka, Melania, and Kushner, because Melania and Ivanka helped him a great deal in staying erect. So
okay. Anyway, Cruz and Hawley are all still doing okay. They've even announced the formation of a new Use Carnivores for Trump political action committee, so they don't seem to be suffering at all. But let's forget national politics for a minute now. Let's talk about things going on in Texas. And I want to start by I keep hearing about cannons going off at these gender reveals. I guess it's not just Texas where that's going on.
Those gender reveals were not a thing back when I had my kids. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, actually, the week after I was born, my parents shot me from a cannon. Like guess my gender.
Oh, Dan.
Were you able to find your way back home? My parents used to like.
What'd you say, May?
Cannon, and I couldn't get back home.
I just said, Dan, I feel so sorry for you, because that means that circumcision must have gone horribly.
Oh, we might be in difficult waters here, so I don't want to belabor this. Well, belabor. I don't want to. Well, anyway, um, let's move on. There is talk again in Texas from the Republicans again about seceding, and the curiosity that goes with it this time is if they have Texas seceding, there's also a proposal that Houston and Dallas and San Antonio and Austin would become separate
Well,
states. And I think,
if at first you don't succeed, try deregulating your power grid and see if you're suddenly outclassed by Floridians.
well, deregulating the power grid, I guess, is a hard lesson if it costs about $30 billion. But I think a lot of people wanted to be, because they're Texas football fans, they wanted to be on the gridiron as opposed to on the grid. At least that's the way I'm looking at it now. Anyway, they're all in Texas. The cattlemen are a big lobby. Meat producers, and what they want to do is to keep these meat imitations, these meat substitutes from being sold as, meat. But I got to tell you this. I got to tell you, people who are buying the plant-based meats already know it's not meat. They even have to pay more money for it sometimes, but they're buying it just because it isn't meat. And so those people, in response to the cattlemen's pressure to get some new laws protecting them, they are starting to heavily advertise. We've got a slide here. We got it from the internet. The one that says, don't forget your Wonder Weenies, because they are a good source of colon cancer and type 2 diabetes and greenhouse gas. And we certainly need to be producing more of that. And there's another side of this that I don't think people think about too often, is that there are, in other countries that are ahead of us in this respect, there are some experiments with meat-based plants that might take over a big share of the market. So
we're back to
that's
talking about
happening. Well, yeah, I guess so. Another big issue in Texas, and it's an issue around the country, reopening schools. And the teachers weigh in on this subject, obviously. There's a study that has recently been done by Mixnut University. It's a preference poll asking people about teachers, and this is almost uniformly decided. 52% of voters say that teachers should get shots, before going back to teach. But about 48% say teachers should get shot. And I think these are the people who believe this are worried about socialism, being taught in the schools, because that's in Biden's stimulus package somewhere, money for textbooks on socialism and so forth. But another dimension of this, and you guys were telling me about this before it even dawned on me, is that the call centers in the Philippines and India, you probably know about them. If you've got a computer problem and you call tech support, then somebody in India says, "Hi, it's Chip. What is your problem?" And the problem is that they are about a jillion miles away from you, but they're used to doing these telephone things, from call centers. So they've been preparing to teach school. But the thing is, all they can really teach is computer tech. So, it's not going to be a complete fit. And another dimension of this, tell me if you know more. Old people are going back to school because they're out of work. They've got nothing else to do. They didn't graduate from high school, so now they want to go back to.
I've heard that's true, boss. But what they're having trouble with is because now the way you believe science is what you see on a YouTube video as opposed to what you get in a textbook. So they're having to deprogram from actual logical scientific thinking and reprogram to watch YouTube videos. So it's been a bit of a struggle.
Yeah,
Mm.
I can see
That is
how
part
that.
of the stimulus bill is actually retraining, and it's entirely people sitting in front of social media.
Well, I'll be dead gum. Um, I thought during the reign of the former president, as you've taught me to say, that there was a trend to anti-social media taking the place of social media. But I guess now we're trying to reform that and behave, right?
Yeah,
But
and by the way, I would call him failed us emeritus.
say that again.
Failed us emeritus. It's Latin.
Okay, okay. Which brings us to the economy, stupid. I guess we're just about at the economy, stupid. So, um, first thing is that there are some job openings now that have to do with Boeing's planes. The 727s, well, we've always had those. The 737s have just gone back into service after that whole long period of
If,
testing.
if I might,
And
if I might,
yes,
boss, I they're actually renaming since they've had so much trouble with the 700 series. They're just renaming all their planes to start with 800 now to get past the FAA scrutiny.
well, that'll be interesting. Uh, I know that a lot of Uber drivers are signing up to drive those planes because at least they can drive. And I think also we were just talking about teachers. A lot of teachers want to go into a new line of work, and they've been driving people's ambitions and goals, and you know, um,
Well,
anyway, they're signing up, but there's only so many jobs to be flying these birds around if we keep putting them on the runway. Now I can't even read what he's saying there. He's saying 1 minute. That's not possible. That's just not possible. So I want to jump ahead to tell you something about the food. Well, no, I have to tell you. First of all, don't eat it at the Shrubway. Don't eat there because you never know what's uh, in your tuna sandwich. Okay, but let me talk about one other things real quickly. We had a bunch of smoke and mirrors talk about what was going on with people selling shorts, and I have no problem with selling shorts, but they were talking about two companies that have gone past their prime: the GameStopper and the AMC theaters. Well, in the GameStopper situation, you had a company that was mostly selling, you know, old software like Pong games and old VHS tapes, and 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 then suddenly they had something that was called a portable laser utility module. This is made by the Spasmatic company. This is a plum. That's what a plum is. No wonder they were selling everything they could. They couldn't even keep anything off the shelf. And the AMC people, their career was almost gone, those theater owners. But then they said, we're going to start specializing in political theater because that's where everybody is these days. And so you see two uh, dwindling, uh, dwindling sources of revenue in the economy come back to life. And so the story is not the story that you've heard before. There was a very good reason why people were buying up that stock. Okay? And next time we'll do our best to tell you how musicians got through this awful period because we never seemed to get there. And while we covered a lot of ground, I'm telling you, we just scratched the surface. So all of you who are trying to get through it, do what May's doing, or do something like that, or but.